You know, there is a specific, sickening sound that a healthy 15-year-old boxwood hedge makes when it's being crushed under the weight of a 2-ton SUV. It's not a snap. It's not a rustle. It's a crunch, a wet, violent, heartbreaking crunch that wakes you up faster than a bucket of ice water to the face. I heard that sound at 6:14 in the morning, shaking me out of a dream where I was fishing on a quiet lake, and by the time I scrambled out the front door, hopping on one foot trying to jam a slipper on, the damage was already done. There it was, my pride and joy. The living green wall I had nurtured since it was nothing but a row of pathetic little twigs in Home Depot buckets, now looked like it had been chewed up and spit out by a mechanized dinosaur. It wasn't just a dent. It was total annihilation. A 10-foot section was flattened into the mud, branches stripped white, leaves scattered like confetti at a funeral for common decency. And right there in the dirt, gleaming in the early morning sun like a diamond in a pile of manure, was a jagged chunk of plastic, a piece of a headlight housing. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not just from the shock, but from the instant, boiling realization that this wasn't an accident. In any other neighborhood, you'd think, oh no, a drunk driver, or wow, a delivery truck lost its brakes. But I don't live in a normal neighborhood. I live in Oakwood Grove. And in Oakwood Grove, we have Brenda. Brenda is our HOA president, a woman who wields her clipboard with the same terrifying authority that medieval kings used to wield executioners' axes. She's the kind of person who walks her dog not to give it exercise, but to inspect your trash cans for unauthorized recycling materials. She once fined a neighbor $50 because his porch light was, and I quote, an aggressive shade of warm white. So when I stared at my mangled hedge, I didn't see a traffic accident, I saw a message. This was the 4th time in 2 weeks. 4 times. And I knew, deep in my gut, that Brenda was behind it because she hated that hedge with a passion usually reserved for rival sports teams or ex-spouses. She claimed it was non-compliant with the open-air aesthetic of the street, which is HOA code for, I can't see into your living room to judge your furniture. I stood there in my driveway, coffee mug cold in my hand, staring at that piece of broken headlight, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger is hot. Anger burns out. This was something colder. This was resolve. I looked up at Brenda's house across the street, saw the curtain twitch in her front window, and I whispered to myself, okay, Brenda, you want to play bumper cars? Let's see how you like hitting a wall. But before we get to the part where I destroy a $40,000 vehicle with a bag of concrete and some steel rebar, you have to understand the level of psychological warfare I was dealing with. It started about 3 months ago. Brenda stopped me while I was mowing the lawn, back when I still had a full hedge to mow next to, and she had that smile. You know the one. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes, just a baring of teeth like a golden retriever that's about to bite you. Elias, she said, tapping her pen against her clipboard. The board has been discussing your vegetation. It's becoming a bit oppressive. We feel it disrupts the visual harmony of the cul-de-sac. Visual harmony? I asked, wiping sweat off my forehead. Brenda, it's a hedge. It's green. It blocks the wind. It keeps the raccoons out. What's the problem? It's a safety risk, she said, dropping the nuclear option. It obscures sight lines. We'd hate for someone to accidentally drive into it because they couldn't see the curve. That was the first threat, though I didn't realize it at the time. A week later, I woke up to find the corner of the hedge smashed. I fixed it, tied it back up. 2 days later, smashed again. Then came the violation notices. Failure to maintain landscaping. Unsightly debris. Vegetation posing a hazard to vehicular traffic. She was fining me for the damage that, I suspected, she was causing. I tried to catch them. Lord knows I tried. I turned my living room into a command center. I moved my recliner to the window, brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to strip paint, and sat there like a paranoid lighthouse keeper waiting for a storm. But whoever was driving this mystery vehicle had impeccable timing. I'd go to the bathroom, crunch. I'd go to the kitchen to make a sandwich, crunch. One time, I literally sneezed, eyes closed for 3 seconds, and when I opened them, the hedge was leaning at a 45-degree angle. It felt like I was being haunted by a ghost with a driver's license. But the fourth time was sloppy. It was late, maybe 11:30 p.m. I was sitting in the dark, watching the streetlights hum, when I saw it. A black, hulking SUV rolling down the street with its headlights off. It was moving slow, predatory, prowling like a shark in shallow water. I held my breath. It crept up to my property line, and then, without warning, the engine roared. A deep, throaty V8 growl, and it surged forward. Whatever restraint they had shown before was gone. The SUV mounted the curb, tires tearing up my grass, and slammed into the hedge with a violence that shook the window frame. But here's the thing. The driver hesitated before peeling away. Just for a second, the interior dome light flickered on as the door jarred, and I saw him. Broad shoulders, receding hairline, polo shirt. It wasn't Brenda. It was Gary. Gary Miller, Brenda's husband. The man who never spoke at HOA meetings, who always looked like he was apologizing for taking up space. The guy I'd loaned my leaf blower to last fall. Gary was the muscle. Gary was the one driving the battering ram while Brenda pulled the strings. Seeing Gary behind the wheel changed everything. This wasn't just petty vandalism. This was a coordinated marital project. They were working in tandem to destroy my property, probably giggling about it over their dinner table. I waited until they sped off, tires squealing, before I went outside. I picked up that piece of plastic headlight housing, a jagged shard of clear polycarbonate, and held it up to the moon. It looked like a trophy, or maybe a promise. Most people would call the police right then. But the police in our town? They treat HOA disputes like nuclear waste. They won't touch it. Civil matter, they'd say. Talk to your board. Talk to the board? The board was the one driving through my shrubbery. No, the law wasn't going to help me. I had to help myself. I went into the garage and stared at my tools. I'm a retired cabinet maker. I know how to build things. I know about structural integrity, about load-bearing capacities, and I know that if you want to stop a 2-ton object, you don't use wood. You use steel and stone. The next morning, I went to the hardware supply store. The guy at the counter, old Sal, looked at my cart. For bags of high-strength quick-set concrete, 6 lengths of 1-inch steel rebar, heavy-duty landscaping boulders. Building a bunker, Elias? Sal asked, chewing on a toothpick. Something like that, Sal, I said. Just reinforcing the perimeter. Got a pest problem. Big pest. About the size of a Chevrolet, I said. I spent the entire afternoon working. I pulled back the broken branches of the hedge. It was sad-looking, barely hanging on, and dug a trench right behind the foliage line. I didn't want it visible. That was the key. If they could see it, they wouldn't hit it. It had to look like the same soft, defenseless target they'd been abusing for weeks. I poured the concrete deep, anchoring the steel rebar vertically so it angled slightly outward, like the pikes medieval archers used to stop a cavalry charge. I wove the steel bars together, creating a rigid, unforgiving skeleton hidden inside the greenery. Then, I packed the boulders around the base, cementing them into a solid, immovable mass. I covered it all with dirt, mulch, and the remaining leaves. When I stepped back, wiping the dirt off my hands, it looked pathetic. It looked broken. It looked exactly like an invitation. I sat on my porch that night. I didn't hide inside. I sat right there in my rocking chair, in the dark, waiting. I knew they'd come back. They'd seen the damage. They knew the hedge was weak. They want to finish the job, clear the sight line completely so Brenda could finally claim her victory. 2:17 a.m. I'll never forget the time because I was looking at my watch when I heard the engine. That same low rumble. It was confident this time. Arrogant. They weren't sneaking. They were coming for the kill. I didn't move. I just rocked in my chair, sipping my lukewarm water, listening. The black SUV turned the corner. Headlights off. It picked up speed earlier this time. Gary was getting brave. He hit the gas at the edge of the driveway, aiming for the center mass of the hedge, expecting leaves and twigs and soft earth to give way beneath his tires. He hit the trap at about 25 miles per hour. The sound was not a crunch. It was a crash, a violent, metal screaming against metal impact that sounded like a bomb going off. Clang crunch hisses. The rear end of the SUV lifted 2 feet into the air. The front end stopped instantly, crumpling like a soda can against the hidden wall of steel and stone. Steam exploded from the radiator. The horn blared continuously, a long, dying wail into the night air. I stood up slowly, stretched my back, and walked down the driveway steps. The driver's door flew open and Gary stumbled out. He looked dazed. His airbag had deployed, dusting him in white powder, making him look like a confused ghost. He was clutching his chest, coughing, staring at the front of his car, which was now permanently married to my landscaping. "Evening, Gary," I said, calm as could be. "You okay?" He spun around, eyes wide, panic setting in. What the hell? What did you do?" "Me?" I asked, putting my hands in my pockets. "I didn't do anything, Gary. You're the one who decided to park inside my shrubbery." It's solid," he shouted, kicking the tire, which immediately made him hop around in pain. "You put a wall in there. You booby-trapped it." "Reinforced," I corrected him. "I reinforced my property. You know, lots of accidents lately. Wanted to be safe." And then, like clockwork, here she came. The porch light across the street flicked on. Brenda came running out in her bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, her hair in curlers, looking like a banshee. "Gary," she shrieked. "Gary, what happened?" She stopped at the edge of the driveway, looking at the carnage. Her precious SUV, the one she drove to real estate showings, was totaled. The engine block was sitting in the front seat. He trapped me, Brenda," Gary whined, pointing at me. "He put steel in the hedge." Brenda turned on me, her face twisting into that familiar mask of indignation. "Elias Thorne, you are in so much trouble. This is malicious destruction of property. I will have you arrested. I will sue you for every penny you have. You can't just put metal spikes in a hedge." "Actually," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my back pocket. "I'd done my research too. According to County Code Section 44B, a homeowner is permitted to install structural retaining walls and protective bollards within their property line as long as they don't encroach on the public easement. My survey says I'm 2 feet inside my line. So really, Brenda, the question isn't why I reinforced my hedge. The question is, why was your husband driving off-road at 2 in the morning?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Gary. Gary looked at the ground. The tow truck arrived 20 minutes later. The driver, a guy named Mike who I play cards with sometimes, couldn't stop laughing. He had to drag the SUV out sideways. The sound of metal screeching against my steel rebar was music to my ears. But as I watched them retreat, Gary limping, Brenda fuming, I noticed something. Brenda wasn't just mad. She was scared. She made a phone call as they were walking away, and I heard her say, "It didn't work. The car is gone. No, I can't ask him to move now. Paul is going to kill us." "Paul? Who was Paul?" The next day, I took the day off. I didn't revel in my victory. I investigated. I went down to Sal's garage, not the hardware store, the mechanic shop he runs on the side. I brought the headlight fragment from the first crash. "Sal," I said, "you know everyone. Who is Paul? And why is Brenda terrified of him?" Sal wiped grease off his hands. "Paul? You mean Paul Vance? The developer?" "Maybe," I said. "Slick guy," Sal said. "Runs Vance Development. He's been buying up lots on the north side. Rumor has it he's trying to put in a high-density condo complex. Needs contiguous lots to get the zoning approved." The tumblers in my brain clicked into place. Contiguous lots. My house. Brenda's house. The Millers next door. "He needs the whole block," I whispered. "If he gets the block," Sal continued, "he makes millions. If he has one holdout, the project dies. He's got investors breathing down his neck." "Why?" "Because Brenda isn't just a petty HOA president," I realized aloud. "She's a blockbuster. She's trying to drive me out." It wasn't about the hedge. It was never about the hedge. The hedge was just the pressure point. They wanted me frustrated. They wanted me to feel unwelcome. They wanted me to sell my house and leave so Vance could bulldoze the neighborhood and build his condos. I drove home slowly. This wasn't a prank war anymore. This was a conspiracy. That evening, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It wasn't Brenda. It was a man in a charcoal suit, no tie, looking like he cost more than my house. "Paul Vance." I opened the door. "Mr. Thorne," he said. Smooth voice. Snake oil voice. "I believe we have a mutual friend. Brenda Miller." "I wouldn't call us friends," I said. "She usually prefers to communicate via car crashes." He didn't smile. "Look, let's cut to the chase. I know about the hedge. I know about the feud. It's childish. I'm a businessman. I want to offer you a way out. I'm prepared to offer you 20% over market value for your home. Cash. Close in 7 days." "I'm not selling, Mr. Vance," I said. "This is my home. I built the cabinets in this kitchen. I planted the trees in the back." He stepped closer. The charm evaporated. "Elias, can I call you Elias? You're an older man. You live alone. Accidents happen. Cars hit hedges. Sometimes pipes burst. Sometimes electrical fires start. It's an unpredictable world. Brenda failed to motivate you. I won't fail. He handed me a card. Think about it. Unpredictable world. He walked away. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. That was a threat. A physical threat. I went to the kitchen and poured a drink, staring at the wall. They thought they could scare me? They thought they could bully a retired cabinet maker who spent 30 years working with table saws and nail guns? I picked up the phone. I didn't call the police. I called Benny. Benny is my nephew. He works in cybersecurity. He's the kind of guy who thinks daylight is a suggestion and lives on energy drinks. But he can find a needle in a digital haystack. Benny, I said, I need you to dig. Paul Vance. Brenda Miller. The HOA accounts. I want to know everything. On it, Uncle E, Benny said. 2 days passed. The tension was thick enough to chew. I kept my lights on. I checked my cameras constantly. Then, Benny sent me an email. Jackpot, the subject line read. I opened the file. It was beautiful. It was disgusting, but it was beautiful. Brenda wasn't just working with Vance. She was on his payroll. There were transfers, disguised as consulting fees, going from a shell company owned by Vance directly into a personal account Brenda shared with Gary. $20,000 so far. Bribery. But there was more. Vance had submitted zoning applications to the city council 6 months ago, fraudulent ones. He claimed he already owned the land. He claimed he had signatures from all the residents agreeing to the rezoning. My signature was there. I looked at the screen. That wasn't my signature. It was a shaky forgery. Forgery. Bribery. Fraud. I printed everything. 3 copies. 1 for me. 1 for the police. And 1 for the local news station, Channel 8 Investigates. But I didn't send them yet. I wanted to see the look on their faces. I walked across the street. It was 6 p.m. Brenda's car was gone, obviously, but a rental was in the driveway. I knocked on the door. Brenda answered. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes. She saw me and tried to slam the door. I put my foot in the jam. We need to talk, Brenda, I said. Go away, Elias. I'm calling the cops. Call them, I said, holding up the folder. Ask for the fraud division. Tell them to bring handcuffs for Paul Vance, too. She froze. The color drained from her face faster than water from a tub. What is that? It's the end, Brenda, I said, pushing the door open gently. It's the bank transfers. It's the forged zoning permits. It's the emails where Vance tells you to make life hell for the old man across the street. She collapsed onto the entryway bench. She started crying. Not fake tears. Real, terrified tears. He made us do it, she sobbed. We were underwater on the house. Gary lost his job. Vance promised us a payout if we got the block sold. He said it would be easy. He said you'd just move. So you let him drive a car into my house. He said we had to escalate. He said if we didn't get you out, he'd sue us for the money he already paid. We were trapped, Elias. You weren't trapped, I said, my voice hard. You were greedy. And now you're done. Please, she begged, grabbing my arm. Please don't go to the police. We'll lose everything. You should have thought about that before you declared war on my Hedge, I said, pulling my arm away. I walked back to my house. I sat down at my computer and hit send on the email to the reporter. Then I called the non-emergency line for the police and asked for a detective. The fallout was swift and spectacular. The news van showed up the next morning. The reporter, a sharp woman named Rodriguez, did a stand-up report right in front of my reinforced hedge. She waved the documents on camera. Corruption in the cul-de-sac, they called it. By noon, the police arrived. Not the patrol officers who ignore noise complaints, but detectives in suits. They marched into Brenda's house and came out with boxes of files. Then they brought Brenda and Gary out. Gary looked like he was going to throw up. Brenda had a coat over her head to hide from the cameras. But the real show was 2 days later. Paul Vance was arrested at his downtown office. The charges were extensive: real estate fraud, forgery, bribery, and conspiracy to commit criminal mischief. Turns out, he'd done this in 3 other neighborhoods. I was just the first one stubborn enough to build a tank trap in my front yard. The HOA was dissolved immediately. It turns out, an organization run by a criminal enterprise doesn't hold much legal water. The liens were lifted. The fines were voided. The neighborhood was quiet for the first time in months. About a week later, I was out in the yard. I had dug up the concrete trap, didn't need it anymore, and I was planting new boxwoods. Better ones. Stronger ones. A car pulled up. It was a beat-up sedan. Brenda got out. She was out on bail, awaiting trial. She looked smaller, older. She walked up to the edge of the lawn. She didn't cross the property line. Elias, she said softly. I didn't look up from my planting. Brenda, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. We're losing the house. Gary is facing jail time. I just wanted you to know. I never wanted to hurt you. I just got lost. I stopped digging. I looked at her. I saw a woman who had let a little bit of power and a lot of fear turn her into a monster. You broke my hedge, Brenda, I said. And you tried to break my life. I don't forgive you. But I hope you learn that you can't bulldoze people just because they're in your way. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and got back in her car. I went back to planting. I patted the soil down around the roots of the new bush. It was small now, but it would grow. It would take time and sun and water, but it would come back. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, walked by with her dog. Looking good, Elias, she called out. Think this one will survive. I smiled, tapping the soil with my shovel. Oh, this one's gonna make it, Martha. The roots are deep. And besides, I think people know better than to mess with my landscaping now. I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset. The street was peaceful. No black SUVs. No clipboards. Just the sound of crickets and the wind in the trees. It's funny. They thought they were fighting an old man who cared too much about a plant. They didn't realize that for guys like me, a hedge isn't just a decoration. It's a boundary. It's a line in the sand that says, this is mine. I worked for this, and you don't get to take it. And if you try, well, you might just find out that some hedges have steel teeth. So, I gotta ask you folks watching this, where's your line? What's the thing you'd fight for if an HOA or a developer tried to take it from you? Would you roll over? Or would you mix up a batch of concrete and wait in the dark? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked watching a corrupt developer get taken down by a retired cabinet maker, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more stories from the neighborhood. Stay safe and watch where you drive.